Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In the previous video, we deployed a Node.js application using Docker. While that works, the application directly to users is not always the best approach. In production environments, we usually place a reverse proxy in front of our application. One of the most popular reverse proxies is Nginx. So in this video, we will learn what Nginx is and why we use it, how to install Nginx, how to configure it as a reverse proxy, how to forward requests to a Node.js application, and verify that everything works. By the end of this video, you'll understand a common architecture used in real-world deployment. Let's get started. So what is Nginx? Now, before we install Nginx, I want us to understand what it is and why it was created. Imagine you own a small online store. Now, when you first launch it, only few people visit each day. So your Node.js application receives every request directly and everything works perfectly. But after a few months, your business becomes popular. Now hundreds or even thousands of people are visiting your website every minute. Your Node.js application is now responsible for everything. It has to receive incoming requests, process every business logic, serve images and static files, and then manage connections, as well as respond to users. So what is the problem with that? As the traffic continues to grow, your application would become very slow. So what is going to happen is that these users that are making requests to your online store would begin to experience long loading times, and some requests can even fail. To solve that, we need another tool that is going to sit in front of your application and efficiently manage incoming requests. So this is where Nginx comes in. So what exactly is Nginx? Now, Nginx is a web server, right? But it can do more than serve web page. Nginx can act as a reverse proxy. Nginx can also act as a load balancer. Nginx can help us with our API gateway. And then Nginx has a caching server, or it can be used as a caching server. There are a lot of things that Nginx can do. But in this video, we are going to focus on one of its most common jobs, using Nginx as a reverse proxy. So what is going to happen? Instead of the users directly talking to your application, they would communicate with Nginx. So this is your Nginx. And so Nginx is going to sit between your users and your application. what is going to happen is that Nginx is going to receive every request that is coming to your application and then inspect this request, then forward it to your application. And remember, we've containerized this application. So this application is running in Docker. Now, to better understand Nginx, you can think of Nginx as a receptionist. So let's say you have a large office building, right? And then this is Nginx. So Nginx is going to be the receptionist in that large office building. So visitors who want to talk to the CEO wouldn't directly walk to the CEO's office. Instead, they'll first speak to Nginx, which is the receptionist. Now, this Nginx is going to check who they want to see and then direct them to the correct office. So in that case, Nginx is here checking who these visitors want to see and then now direct them to the CEO's office. So it stands in front of your application so that every request that is coming is being received and then Nginx is going to forward it to the correct service. Now, why does this matter? This is going to make your application more secure and easier to manage. It means that this application is also ready to scale as traffic grows. So as more users are making requests to your application, then we can scale our application to accept those incoming traffic. Now that we understand why Nginx exists, let's see how we are going to configure it to sit in front of our Dockerized Node.js application. Now let's look at our current setup. Our current setup, we have a user that will now access our Node.js application that we've Dockerized. Okay, so this user is requesting to have access to our application. What is going to be our new setup? Because we want the request to go to our receptionist, which is going to be Nginx, we are going to now pick Nginx from here and then let it be in between, right? So what is going to happen now is that the user will not make the request directly to our Node.js application. Instead, the request will be forwarded to Nginx, and then Nginx will now forward the request to our application. Then our application will be displayed to the user as our response. Okay. So Nginx receives requests from the user, then forward those requests to our Node.js application. So what will be the benefits of this new setup? The first benefit that we are going to get is what we call, let's say, better security. Okay, so let me explain. Think of your app like your house. So Nginx is like a front gate plus a security guard. So visitors will talk to the guard first, not go straight to your front door. Now, this is going to help you block or limit any suspicious traffic. Example, if you are getting too many requests to your application too fast, Nginx is going to block it. Nginx is also going to hide your app's real address, such as the maybe the internal port number. So it's going to make it hard for your app to be targeted directly. Another benefit of using Nginx is for load balancing support. Okay, so I'm going to explain this as well. So Nginx is going to act as a reverse proxy, like I mentioned initially. So it's going to accept incoming traffic. And if you have multiple backend servers, Nginx is going to distribute it across this pool of backend servers. Now, this load balancing approach with Nginx is going to ensure that no single resource is overburdened. So if you have a lot of backend servers, all the requests won't be going to one server. So Nginx is acting like, let's say, a traffic hub, right? And then it's looking at the incoming traffic and then directing it to, let's say, the less busy server. So it's maximizing the load that you are getting on your server. So this is going to increase the performance of your application, prevent system crash, and provide high availability for users. Now I've SSH into my EC2 instance and I want to verify whether my application is still containerized, that is, it's running inside my Docker container. So how do I do that? I'll do sudo docker ps to check all running processes. So you can see that I have my container ID and then my Node.js image. Then it has been running for 3 weeks. Actually forgot to stop this my EC2 instance. It's been running for 3 weeks without doing any work on it. So guys, let's always remember to stop our instance if we are not using it. Okay. So our instance is running. When we go to our IP address and then port 3000, we should have access to our Node.js application that says I think hello world. Let's verify. All right, so I've entered my IP address and then the port that the application is running on. That's our Node.js application. I'm going to confirm whether this application is still running. So I click on enter and then I have this hello from Docker. That is what we did in our previous video. So this confirms that our application is running. Now what we want to do is to use Nginx as a reverse proxy. One thing I realized when I check my EC2 instance is that I've already installed Nginx on it, and Nginx was or is serving as a web server. So Nginx is currently serving some static website for users. So when I go to this IP address, I should see that HTML site that I built that I was using for a different purpose installed on my EC2 instance. Okay, so if I click here, you realize that that's the same IP that we are on, right? And then it's on the default port as port 80 for HTTP protocols. So this is what is running on my EC2 instance, and this site is being served by Nginx. So Nginx is acting as a web server that is serving my HTML site. What is our goal? Our goal is to use Nginx as a reverse proxy. So now the challenge is, how do we use Nginx as a reverse proxy when it is currently serving our HTML website? Before we move any further, we can still confirm whether Nginx has been successfully installed on our EC2 instance and it is running. So how do we do that? You do sudo and then systemctl. Then we want to look for the status of a service called Nginx. Okay. So when I click on enter here, you see that Nginx is active and running, and it's been running from I think 24th of June, right? So it's been running for 2 weeks now. So our Nginx has been installed, so we will not have any need to install Nginx. However, if you wanted to install Nginx on this your EC2 instance, what you would have to do is to update your packages first using the sudo apt update, and then when you are done, you are going to install Nginx by doing sudo apt install, then Nginx, and then you use your dash Y flag that is saying yes to some default settings, right? And then once it is done, you can verify that Nginx is starting or it has been activated. So you can do sudo systemctl status of Nginx, and then you should see that it's active and it's running. Okay, so now we know Nginx is now running on our server, and when we visit our application using a given IP address, what we are seeing is not the default message that is being displayed by Nginx, that is the welcome to Nginx and default template. But this time we are seeing an HTML site or a static website that I built for a different purpose. So now the question is, how do we use Nginx as a reverse proxy when it is serving as a web server or serving static websites? Now that we know Nginx is active on our server, we need to understand certain configuration files before we proceed in making Nginx a reverse proxy. So let's cd into the Nginx directory. I'm going to do cd into etc and then Nginx. Okay, so I'm in the Nginx directory. If I do ls, I'm going to see the content of this directory. Now there are three important directories I want you to take notice of: the site enabled, the site available, and the nginx.conf file. Okay, so let's understand what they mean, especially the site enabled and the site available. So let's start with the site available. In Nginx, site available and site enabled are the two directories that are used to organize and manage configuration files for multiple websites on a single server. So this lets you easily turn websites on and off without deleting your configuration code. Now, these two files or directories that I mentioned, the site enabled and site available, have some differences. Let's look at the core difference. The first one we will talk about is the site available. So think of the site available as your storage. The main purpose is that this directory is going to store your actual website configuration files, what we normally would call the server blocks. So files that are placed here are inactive by default, meaning that Nginx does not read this folder when it's launching. It's going to serve as a staging ground or an archive for all your website configuration. So the site available is like a storage, it's a staging ground. Then we have the site enabled, which you can think of it like the live switch. So the purpose of this directory is to tell engineers which website should go live. So the files here are the active files. Now, instead of copying these files over, this folder contains what you call the symbolic link or sim link that is pointing to the original files in the site available. I get me. So the site enable is where we enable our live site, referencing the sites that we have in the sites available. And then lastly, the nginx.conf file is specifically programmed to load everything inside this site enabled directory. So I'm going to list all my enabled sites and then look at, once I list all my enabled sites, I'll see the site that is active, that's the live switch. Okay, so I'm going to go into my site enabled and then let's see which directories are enabled. So do ls dash l and then I'll go to etc. Actually, I'm already here, so I'm just going to do site enabled, right? And I'll click on enter. So what I'm seeing here is this default. Okay, so this default configuration is what has been enabled, and it picked it from my site available, which is my storage. So in my site available, I have the default configuration, and then I've enabled it in my site enabled. Okay, if yours is not default, it means that you give this configuration a different name. So what I want to do next is to back up the current configuration, because we never modify production configurations without a backup. So since I'm using the default site, I'm going to do sudo cp and then backup what I have here as default. Uh, so let me go into this site enabled. I'm going to go to the storage area, right? So I'm going to go to site available rather, and then this is my default configuration that I enabled in site enabled. So I'm going to create a backup of it. I'm going to put it still in the same directory. So I'm going to say, let's go to etc Nginx. Then let's go to the same site available directory. Then I'm going to name this default dot backup. Okay. Okay. So let's verify what we have in our site available. Okay, so let's go to ls. I want to look at this site available here. I have my defaults. Okay, so no such file or directory. Let's try one more time. I'm going to do sudo copy everything that I have in. Okay, let me cd into sites available. Right, so I'm in that directory. Then I'm just going to do a sudo copy what I have here as a default, and then name it default. Going to name it default previous. Okay, so when I do ls here, I have my previous default, and then it's my new configuration. Okay, so we have backup our site. If something goes wrong, we can quickly restore our previous configuration. So what we now have to do is to edit that active configuration. And remember, we are doing everything in the site available directory. That is our storage. Okay, so we're going to use sudo nano, and then I would go to my default configuration, enter. Then this is my default configuration. Okay, so this is the server block where we have my configuration, and this is what is currently serving my HTML website. What we want to do is to use it as a reverse proxy. So I'm going to copy some code, paste it there, and then explain what that code is doing. I've edited my configuration file. So let's understand what this new block of code means, right? So the first one is listen, and then we have a port 80. So this tells Nginx to listen for HTTP traffic. Okay, so that's the first thing that you want to know. The server name, we are leaving it as default, picking a default server name, and this is the where we have the most important configuration files. So we have a location, and then there is a slash. So what it means is that if there's any incoming request that is targeted toward the base URL, that is slash, it doesn't have um, any other thing appended to the slash. That is, you are targeting the base URL. Then what Nginx is going to do is that Nginx is going to forward the request to our Node.js application using this line. That's a proxy pass. So it's going to forward the request to our Node.js application, which we can currently access using localhost and then the port 3000. So this is where our Node.js application is running. So what it means that if somebody makes a request to the base URL, that's slash, maybe the IP address, gets the IP address and then slash, then forward a request to localhost, then port 3000. So example, if the user says, hey, go to http slash slash maybe 50 dot blah blah blah, that's the server IP, then because Nginx is being used as a reverse proxy, Nginx is going to forward our request to our application. And remember that our application is running on this port. So it's going to forward it to http localhost and then port 3000. Okay. So once we've done this, we need to now save this file and then test the configuration. So I'm going to do a control X. So now let me make sure I save this. So I'm just going to do nano default here. Okay. And then do a control X. Okay, let me test if this file was saved successfully. So I'm going to just do sudo nginx dash t, that's testing the connection. Click on OK. Okay, Nginx not found. I have to change this, add an X to it, and then test my connection. Okay, so it is telling me that my configuration file is successful, meaning that everything is working as expected. Right. So the syntax is okay, and then the test is successful. So what we need to do next is to restart our Nginx. Okay, so what we can do is we can do our sudo systemctl restart Nginx. Okay, so let's restart our Nginx and then check the state of Nginx. I'm going to do sudo systemctl and then I want the status of Nginx. Okay, so we realize that everything is running as expected, active since Monday this time. So the final thing that we can do is to test our reverse proxy. So what it means is that when I go to my IP address, I shouldn't see my HTML website, but this time I should see my Nginx application that we've containerized. Okay, so let's see the output. Right, so this my IP address. Right, when I reload, we should see my hello from Docker. So initially we were having our HTML website beautifully done, but this time now we've changed the configuration to use Nginx as a reverse proxy. So I no longer need to go here to have access to my application, which is still running on port 3000. Users would access my IP address, and then Nginx would be the receptionist at the front desk, receiving the request and then directing it to the right application. This time, our Node.js application. So you just hit this IP just to reiterate, and then they will land on my Node.js application that is displaying hello from Docker. So this proves that we have been able to use Nginx as a reverse proxy. So now that Nginx is handling our traffic, users don't need to directly access this port 3000. They don't need to come here, that's enter the IP address and then the port 3000 to access the application. So we can remove this security group rule that's for the port 3000 on our EC2 instance. So when you come to our EC2 instance and then check security, you should see that we've opened port 3000 here. Okay, so what will be beneficial is that let's remove this port 3000 so we don't have any security loophole, and then just leave the port 80. So this is the default port that they will be hitting, and then we will now be redirected to port 3000. This is going to improve the security of your application. So today we've learned what reverse proxy is, why Nginx is commonly used as reverse proxy. We've also learned how to configure Nginx as a reverse proxy, and then how to forward requests to our Dockerized Node.js application, and how this architecture is used in real production environment. In the next video, we'll make this setup even better by using Docker Compose to manage both the Node.js application and Nginx together. If you found this video useful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next project. Have a great day.